The transport shuttle touched down on red soil, kicking up dust that sparkled in the light of two suns. Robert Hayes stepped out first, breathing air that smelled like rain and minerals. Behind him, 300 humans filed down the ramp carrying bags and boxes filled with their lives. This was Haven 7, their new home, and it looked nothing like the pictures. The landing zone sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills. Forest stretched beyond the hills, dark green and thick. Other settlements dotted the valley floor, structures built by aliens who had arrived months earlier. Insect-like beings with shells that clicked when they moved. Amphibious creatures with skin that changed colors. Crystalline people who sang instead of spoke, all of them living under rules that made Robert's jaw tight. A hovering drone approached, projecting a hologram of a thin alien with too many arms. The Galactic Union representative spoke in perfect English, translated by machines embedded in the air itself. No weapons allowed on Haven 7, no guns, no energy rifles, no explosives, no military technology of any kind. This colony was an experiment in peaceful living. Species would cooperate because none could dominate through force. Robert listened and nodded. He signed the digital documents that floated in front of his face. His people would follow the rules. They always did. The drone seemed satisfied and flew away to monitor other parts of the colony. The other species had built their settlements in the flat areas, close to water sources and open ground. They used prefabricated structures provided by the Union, simple boxes that kept out weather and provided basic comfort, safe, easy, predictable. Robert looked at those settlements and then looked at the rocky hills near the forest edge. That was where humans would build. His second in command, a woman named Anne Garrett with arms like iron and hands scarred from years of work, walked up beside him. She carried a heavy pack that clinked when she moved. Inside were hammers and tongs, files and chisels, things made from steel and shaped by human hands. "They think we're crazy for choosing this spot," Anne said, watching insect aliens click their mandibles in what might have been laughter. "Let them think what they want," Robert replied. He gestured to the hills. "We need stone. We need timber. We need space to work." The humans moved their equipment up into the hills. The other species watched but did not help. They did not understand why anyone would choose difficult terrain when easy land sat empty. The insect beings, who called themselves chitters, were especially confused. Their observer, a creature with a name that sounded like wind through grass, approached Robert that first evening. "Why do you settle in hard places?" the chitter asked through a translation device that made its voice sound mechanical. Robert was helping David Park, a man who understood wood better than most people understood their own families. Mark out areas for construction. He paused and wiped sweat from his forehead. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky purple and orange. "Because hard places make strong people," Robert said simply. The chitter's antennae twitched. It did not understand. It clicked something that might have been goodbye and walked back to its own settlement where everything was level and safe. That night, humans worked under portable lights. They did not build homes first. Instead, Anne set up a forge, a simple structure with a chimney made from local clay. David constructed a workshop with a roof but open sides, filled with workbenches and tools that looked ancient. Patricia Okafor, whose family had worked leather for 6 generations back on Earth, laid out hides and began the long process of turning animal skin into something useful. Other humans dug into the hillside, creating storage spaces that stayed cool. They planted quick-growing crops in terraced gardens. They built a well that pulled clean water from deep underground. Everything they did seemed backward to the other species. Why work so hard when the Union provided food dispensers and water purifiers? But humans were not building for comfort. They were building for something else. Raymond Kimura led teams into the forest each day. He was a biologist who had studied Earth's deadliest ecosystems. Here on Haven 7, he cataloged every plant, every animal, every insect. He drew maps of game trails and water sources. He noted which creatures were predators and which were prey. The forests held secrets, and Raymond believed in knowing secrets before they became problems. 1 week passed. Then 2. The human settlement grew in the hills, looking more like an ancient village than a modern colony. Smoke rose from Anne's forge as she heated iron pulled from local ore. The sound of hammering echoed across the valley. David's workshop produced wooden shafts, straight and strong, fitted with metal tips that Anne forged. Patricia's leather goods hung on racks, curing in the sun. The chitters sent observers who watched and reported back. The amphibious deepkin, who lived near the largest lake, commented that humans seemed obsessed with making things by hand. The crystalline lumens, whose bodies caught light and split it into rainbows, sang songs of confusion about the strange mammals who rejected easy technology. Robert let them wonder. He walked through the settlement each evening, checking on progress. Anne showed him spearheads, razor-sharp and balanced. David displayed arrows with fletching made from local bird feathers. Patricia held up a leather vest reinforced with metal rings, flexible but strong. "How many?" Robert asked. "Enough," Anne replied. "And more every day," Robert nodded. He looked down at the valley where other species lived in their safe boxes, protected by drones that hummed through the air day and night. Those drones were the only weapons on Haven 7, the only protection. Everyone else had agreed to be helpless, trusting machines to keep them safe. Humans had agreed to different terms. No guns, no energy weapons, no military technology. But nobody had said anything about steel shaped by fire. Nobody had banned wood carved by skilled hands. Nobody had forbidden knowledge that was 10,000 years old. Robert watched the forest beyond the hills. It was dark now, and sounds came from those shadows. Sounds of things moving, things hunting. Raymond had reported tracks near the forest edge, prints from creatures that walked on 6 legs and stood as tall as men. The drones kept those creatures away. For now. But Robert had lived long enough to know that machines failed. Technology broke. Systems went dark. When that happened, other species would have nothing but their soft bodies and their trust in union promises. Humans would have something else. Something older. Something that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues, through wars and disasters, through every nightmare that Earth had ever thrown at them. They would have the old ways, and on Haven 7 under alien suns and watched by confused neighbors, those old ways were coming back to life in forges and workshops and skilled hands that remembered what it meant to survive. The first month ended. The human settlement stood ready. Not comfortable, not easy, but ready for whatever came next. Metal sang against metal in the morning heat. Anne brought her hammer down again and again, shaping iron that glowed orange like a small sun. Sparks flew with each strike, landing on the dirt floor of the forge where they died in tiny flashes. She had been working since before dawn and sweat soaked through her shirt, but her arms never tired. This was what she was born to do. The spearhead taking shape on her anvil was the 43rd she had made this week. Each one balanced perfectly, with edges sharp enough to split hair and a point that could punch through thick hide. She had learned this craft from her grandfather, who had learned it from his grandfather. Going back through generations to a time when metalwork meant survival, that knowledge lived in her hands now, and Haven 7 needed it. Outside the forge, David measured a piece of wood with hands that moved like they were dancing. The tree had come from the forest edge, cut down by a team of humans who knew which trees to take and which to leave. Its grain ran straight and true, perfect for what he needed. He marked it with chalk, then picked up a tool that his father had carried from Earth, a draw knife with a blade worn smooth from decades of use. Wood curled away in long strips as David worked. The shape emerged slowly, a shaft 7 feet long and thick as a thumb, strong enough to withstand impact but light enough to throw. He had made dozens of these, and each one felt like greeting an old friend. His hands knew this work the way birds knew flight. Patricia sat under a canvas shade, working leather that had been soaking in a solution of tree bark and water for 3 weeks. The hide was soft now, pliable, ready to be cut and shaped. She laid out a pattern, pieces that would become a vest designed to stop claws and teeth. Metal rings waited in a basket beside her, each one forged by Anne and linked by hand into sheets of chainmail. A chitter approached, walking on legs that clicked against stone. It watched Patricia work for several minutes, its compound eyes reflecting light in rainbow patterns. Finally, it spoke through its translation device. "Why do you make these things? The Union provides protection." Patricia did not look up from her work. Her needle moved in and out of the leather, pulling thread made from plant fibers. "The Union provides drones. Drones are machines. Machines break. The drones have never failed," the chitter said. "Yet," Patricia replied. She tied off a stitch and held up the vest, checking her work. "They have never failed yet." The chitter's antennae quivered. It walked away without saying more, confused by human paranoia. Why prepare for disasters that would never come? Raymond returned from the forest with his team as the second sun reached its highest point. They carried notebooks filled with sketches and observations. He had mapped 15 square miles of forest in the past month, charting everything that lived and grew there. His people knew where the herbivores grazed and where the predators denned. They knew which plants were poisonous and which could be eaten. They knew the forest better than creatures that had lived there for generations. But something bothered Raymond. The deeper parts of the forest held signs of large predators, creatures that left tracks bigger than any he had seen near the colony. Six-toed prints pressed deep into soft earth, scratch marks on trees 8 feet off the ground, bones of prey animals cracked open for marrow. Whatever made these signs was big, strong, and hungry. He found Robert at the workshop discussing designs with David. Raymond spread his sketches on a workbench pointing to the tracks. They're out there, past the drone perimeter. I think they've been avoiding the protected zones, but they know we're here. Robert studied the drawings. How many? Packs, maybe 20 to a pack. Could be more. The locals call them rift claws. Have they attacked anyone? Not yet. The drones keep them away, but if something happened to the drones... Raymond let the sentence hang unfinished. Robert nodded slowly. He looked around at the settlement, at humans working with purpose and skill. Then we keep preparing. Show me where their territories are. I want to know every approach route. The work continued. Anne's forge never went cold. David's workshop produced shafts by the dozen. Patricia trained 3 other leather workers, teaching them techniques her grandmother had taught her. Soon, leather armor hung on racks throughout the settlement, alongside wooden shields faced with metal and studded with nails. Other humans practiced in an open area near the workshop. They formed lines, shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping. They moved together, responding to shouted commands. Former soldiers taught fighting techniques, but not modern ones. These were tactics from ancient Earth, from times when men fought with bronze and iron, when survival depended on discipline and teamwork. Spears thrust forward in unison. Shields locked together into walls that nothing could break. Hours passed as humans drilled, learning to move as one body with many arms. They practiced until movements became automatic, until muscles remembered what minds might forget in panic. The Deepkin found this especially amusing. They gathered at the edge of the practice field, their color-changing skin flickering with patterns that meant laughter. One of them, a leader named something that translated as swimming through reeds, but approached Robert. "You play at war like children," it said, its voice bubbling like water over stones. "There is no war here. The Union promises peace." Robert wiped sweat from his face. Around him, humans continued drilling, shields thudding against shields. "We're not playing. We're remembering." Remembering what? That peace is a luxury. Safety is a gift, and gifts can be taken away. The Deepkin's skin flashed red, a sign of irritation. "You waste time on primitive foolishness. We build comfortable homes. We create art. We live civilized lives. What do you create? Weapons that violate the spirit of our agreement. We create nothing that breaks the rules," Robert said calmly. "No guns, no energy weapons. No military technology. Just wood and metal shaped by hand. Tools, not weapons. Though I suppose tools can be both." The Deepkin made a sound like water draining and walked away. Its skin showed colors that meant disgust and superiority. Let the humans play their games. Let them waste effort on pointless preparations. The real species of the galaxy had evolved beyond such barbarism. But that night, as Robert walked the perimeter of the human settlement, he saw lights in the forest. Eyes reflecting moonlight, shapes moving between trees. The drones hummed overhead and the shapes melted back into darkness. Watching. Waiting. Robert checked the storage buildings. Spears lined the walls in neat rows, hundreds of them. Bows hung from pegs with arrows bundled by the thousands. Shields stacked 10 high. Armor sorted by size. Everything organized, everything accessible, everything ready. Anne found him there, her face still smudged with soot from the forge. "Can't sleep?" "Thinking," Robert said. "About?" He pointed toward the forest. "Raymond's right. There's something out there. Something big. And it's getting curious," Anne nodded. She picked up a spear, testing its weight. "Good thing we're ready, are we?" "We're human," Anne said simply. "We're always ready. We've been ready for 50,000 years. This is just another Tuesday for our species." Robert smiled despite his worry. She was right. Humans had survived ice ages without technology. They had killed mammoths with pointed sticks. They had spread across Earth armed with nothing but stone and determination. Every human alive carried that legacy in their bones, that knowledge in their blood. The other species on Haven 7 trusted technology and rules. They believed the galaxy was civilized now, safe, ordered. They had forgotten what it meant to be prey. They had forgotten that nature did not care about agreements and promises. But humans remembered. Humans always remembered. And in the hills above the valley and forges and workshops and training grounds, that memory was becoming reality again. Wood and metal, leather and steel, skills older than writing, knowledge that had never truly died. The twin suns set behind the mountains and darkness covered Haven 7. In that darkness, the forest came alive with sounds of hunting. And in the human settlement, workers continued their tasks by firelight, preparing for a future that other species could not imagine. The sky turned wrong at midday. Green light rippled across the heavens like water disturbed by stones. Raymond looked up from his survey work and felt his stomach drop. Solar flare, a big one, the kind that fried electronics and knocked out communication satellites. The drones fell first. All across the valley, hundreds of hovering machines simply stopped working. They dropped from the sky like dead birds, crashing into dirt and water and stone. The humming that had been constant background noise for 3 months went silent. That silence felt heavy, dangerous, like the moment before a storm breaks. Raymond ran. His team ran with him, racing back toward the settlements. They had been mapping the forest edge when the sky changed, and now they were exposed, vulnerable, alone. Behind them, from deep in the forest, came sounds they had never heard before. Roaring, howling, the crash of large bodies moving through underbrush. The rift claws had been waiting. For months they had circled the drone perimeter, kept back by machines that hurt them with sonic pulses and electric shocks. But the machines were dead now. Nothing stopped them anymore. Nothing stood between them and the soft, easy prey in the valley. The first attack hit the Chitter settlement. 6 rift claws burst from the tree line, moving faster than creatures their size should move. They stood 8 feet at the shoulder, covered in scales that looked like metal with claws as long as knives. 6 legs drove them forward with terrible speed, mouths open to show teeth meant for tearing. Chitters scattered in every direction, clicking in panic. They had no weapons. They had no defenses. Their shells were meant to protect against other insects, not against predators that could bite through steel. 3 chitters died in the first 30 seconds, crushed and torn. The others ran for their buildings, but prefabricated walls offered no real protection. At the Deepkin settlement, 4 rift claws charged from the opposite side of the valley. The amphibious aliens dove into their lake, seeking safety in water, but rift claws could swim. They followed the Deepkin down, and the water turned dark with blood. Those who made it to shore found more predators waiting, hunting in coordinated packs like wolves, but bigger, smarter, more deadly. The lumens tried to fight back. Their crystalline bodies could focus light into beams that burned, but it took time to generate enough energy. 3 lumens stood together, building power for a defensive blast. A rift claw hit them from the side, moving too fast to track. Crystal bodies shattered like glass. The sound rang across the valley like broken bells. Robert heard the screams from the human settlement. He was already moving, shouting orders, organizing his people into teams they had practiced 100 times. This was what they had prepared for. This was why they had spent months making weapons and drilling formations and learning skills from ancient Earth. Anne. Arm everyone! David, get the spears distributed! Patricia, armor for the combat teams. People moved with purpose, no panic, no hesitation. They had trained for this. Within 2 minutes, humans emerged from buildings wearing leather vests reinforced with metal. They carried shields and spears, bows and axes. They formed up in groups of 10, each group knowing exactly what to do. Robert led the first team down into the valley at a run. 20 humans in formation, shields locked, spears ready. They moved like a single organism, each person knowing their place, their role, their responsibility. Former soldiers led each group, but the tactics they used came from centuries before guns existed. The Chitter settlement was chaos. Rift claws rampaged through structures, tearing apart everything they found. Bodies lay scattered across the ground. Surviving chitters huddled in groups, trying to use their numbers as protection. But against creatures this size, numbers meant nothing without weapons. Robert's team hit the nearest rift claw from the side. 20 spears struck as one, driving through scales that should have been impenetrable. The creature roared and spun, trying to attack, but the shield wall held. Humans pushed forward, spears thrusting again and again, finding gaps in armor, targeting joints and soft tissue. The rift claw went down thrashing. Another predator charged the formation. Humans braced, shields angled to deflect impact. The rift claw hit like a battering ram, but the wall held. Spears found its throat and belly. It clawed its shield, scoring deep grooves in wood and metal, but could not break through. More spears thrust home. The creature collapsed, gurgling its last breaths. At the Deepkin settlement, Anne led a team of humans armed with crossbows. Rift claws in the water made easy targets. Bolts flew with mechanical precision, each one finding flesh. The creatures thrashed and bled, trying to escape, but too wounded to swim fast. Anne's people reloaded and fired again, working with calm efficiency. They had practiced this for hours every day. David led a group to the Lumen settlement, where crystalline bodies lay broken among buildings. 3 rift claws circled surviving lumens, preparing to finish them. David's team formed a wedge, shields overlapping, spears leveled. They charged at a steady jog, boots hitting ground in unison, making noise to draw attention. The rift claws turned toward this new threat. They saw small prey, soft-skinned, vulnerable, easy meat. They charged, confident in their size and strength. They had never fought humans before. They had never encountered creatures that turned weakness into strategy, that used cooperation and tools to multiply their effectiveness. The first rift claw impaled itself on 3 spears at once. The second found axes chopping at its legs, hamstringing it, bringing it down where humans could reach vital areas. The third tried to circle, looking for an opening, but the formation rotated smoothly, always presenting shields and spears, never exposing vulnerability. Across the valley, human teams engaged rift claws with practiced efficiency. They did not try to overpower the creatures. They did not rely on individual strength. Instead, they used tactics refined over thousands of years of human warfare. Formations that protected individuals while maximizing group striking power. Weapons that extended reach and penetrated armor. Coordinated movements that confused predators evolved to hunt alone or in simple packs. Patricia led a team protecting the wounded. They established a defensive perimeter, shields facing outward, spears ready for anything that approached. Inside the perimeter, humans with medical training treated injured aliens, chitters with crushed shells, Deepkin bleeding from massive wounds, lumens with cracks through their bodies that leaked light like blood. The battle lasted 2 hours. Rift claws kept coming, drawn by the scent of blood and the sounds of chaos, but human formations held. Teams rotated when tired, fresh fighters replacing those who needed rest. Communication moved through hand signals and short calls, coordinated and clear. Robert found himself facing down a rift claw bigger than the others, possibly an alpha, a pack leader. It circled his formation, intelligent eyes calculating, looking for weakness. Robert watched it back, shield steady, spear ready. The creature feinted left, testing. The formation shifted to compensate. It feinted right. Again the formation responded. Then it charged straight ahead, all 6 legs driving it forward with devastating speed. Robert braced. The impact nearly knocked him over, but humans on either side held him up, shields locked together. The rift claw's jaws snapped inches from his face. He smelled its breath, hot and rotten. Then spears thrust from 5 angles at once, finding the soft tissue under its jaw, piercing up into its brain. The creature shuddered and went still. As the second sun touched the horizon, the attack stopped. Dead and dying rift claws littered the valley. Survivors retreated into the forest, back to whatever dens they called home. They had learned something today. These new prey fought back. These soft-skinned creatures were dangerous in ways the rift claws did not understand. Robert stood in the center of the valley, breathing hard, covered in blood that was not his own. Around him, humans tended to the wounded, salvaged what could be saved, and counted the cost. 3 humans dead, killed in the initial chaos before formations could establish. 23 wounded, most not seriously. Every alien settlement had suffered worse. Dozens dead, hundreds wounded, structures destroyed. A chitter approached Robert, moving slowly, painfully. Half its shell was crushed, but it was alive. It looked at the human defenders, at their bloodied spears and dented shields, at their tired faces and steady hands. "You knew," it said through its translator. "You prepared." "We remembered," Robert replied. There's a difference. The chitter's antennae drooped. We thought you were primitive, barbaric, playing with useless weapons. Our weapons kept you alive. Around them, other aliens emerged from hiding spots and ruined buildings. They looked at humans with new eyes. These strange mammals from Earth had saved them using methods that seemed ancient and crude. But crude did not mean ineffective. Ancient did not mean obsolete. The Deepkin leader, swimming through reeds, approached. Its skin showed colors of respect and shame. I mocked you. I called you primitive. You did, Robert agreed. You saved my people anyway. We did. The Deepkin's skin flickered through patterns of confusion and gratitude. Why? Robert planted his spear in the ground and leaned on it, exhausted. Because we're neighbors. Because when the machines failed, only people remained, and people either help each other or die alone. That night, as humans set watches around the valley and built fires to light the darkness, alien survivors watched and learned. They saw that advanced technology was wonderful until it failed. They saw that old knowledge had value they had never imagined. They saw that humans had brought more to Haven 7 than just bodies and buildings. They had brought 50,000 years of survival experience, written in blood and passed down through generations who never forgot what it cost to stay alive. Dawn brought work instead of rest. Robert had barely slept, spending the night coordinating watches and organizing defenses. Now he stood in the center of the valley, surrounded by aliens who had never held weapons before, trying to explain concepts that humans learned as children. A young chitter named Click and Whistle held a spear awkwardly, its insect limbs not designed for grasping long poles. Anne worked with it patiently, showing how to grip near the balance point, how to thrust with the body's weight behind the blow, how to use the spear's length to keep danger at a distance. Like this, Anne demonstrated, her movement smooth from decades of practice. The spear is an extension of your arm. Don't jab, thrust, use your core strength. Click and Whistle tried again. The spear wobbled, but the thrust was straighter. Anne nodded approval. Better. Practice that motion 1,000 times. Then it will feel natural. Across the practice area, David taught lumens how to craft shields from local wood. Their crystalline bodies were strong but brittle, vulnerable to impact. A good shield could mean the difference between a cracked body and a shattered one. The grain of the wood matters, David explained, running his hand along a plank. See how these lines run? That's the direction of strength. Cut against the grain and the shield will split. Cut with it and the shield will flex without breaking. The lumens listened intently, their bodies chiming softly as they communicated among themselves. One asked through a translation device, "Why did humans preserve this knowledge?" "Your species has advanced technology," David smiled. "Because technology fails. Wood doesn't. A shield made by hand will work the same way 1,000 years from now. Can you say that about anything electronic?" The lumen's body flashed with colors that meant understanding. They had learned that lesson the hard way when the drones fell from the sky. Patricia sat under a canvas shelter with a dozen deepkin, showing them how to cure leather. Their amphibious skin was vulnerable to claws and teeth. Leather armor could save their lives, but first they had to learn how to make it. The hide is worthless without tanning, Patricia explained, working solution into a piece of skin with strong fingers. Raw hide will rot or turn stiff as board, but treat it properly and it becomes flexible protection. A deepkin touched the finished leather piece Patricia offered. Its skin showed colors of amazement. "This came from an animal?" "Everything useful comes from something," Patricia said. "Animals, plants, minerals. Humans learned to use what nature provides. We learned because we had to." While teaching continued, other humans built defenses around each settlement. They dug trenches in sweeping curves, placing sharpened stakes at angles to impale anything that fell in. They constructed wooden palisades, logs driven deep into the ground and lashed together with rope made from plant fibers. They built watchtowers at strategic points, giving defenders high ground and clear sight lines. Robert oversaw construction of a trap line at the forest edge. Humans worked in teams digging pits and covering them with branches and dirt. Anything walking over them would fall through onto spikes below. Other traps were simpler but equally effective. Snare lines at leg height for large creatures, tripwires connected to logs suspended in trees, channels that funneled attackers into killing zones where defenders could concentrate their fire. A chitter engineer watched this work with fascination. Its name translated roughly as Designs with Purpose, and it had spent years learning advanced construction techniques at Union universities. but nothing in its education had prepared it for what humans were building. "These defenses are so simple," it said to Robert. "Just wood and rope and holes in the ground." "Simple works," Robert replied, checking the tension on a snare line. "Complex systems have complex failures. Simple systems just work. But they seem so crude." Robert stood and faced the engineer. "Let me ask you something. If I gave you a plasma cannon, could you fix it when it broke?"
No, that would require specialized tools and knowledge. Right, but could you sharpen a stick?
The chitter's antennae twitched. "Yes. Then you understand why simple is better. Anyone can maintain these defenses. Anyone can build them. They never run out of ammunition or need recharging. They just work forever as long as someone maintains them." The engineer was quiet for a moment. "Then, will you teach me how to build these things? That's why we're here." Training intensified as days passed. Humans drilled alien volunteers in basic combat formations. The shield wall was easiest to teach, a simple concept but devastatingly effective. Stand together, shields overlapping, presenting a solid front that nothing could penetrate. Different species had different body shapes, but the principle remained the same. What proved harder was teaching aggression. Most species in the Galactic Union had evolved past their predator phase. They had been civilized for so long that fighting felt alien to them. Uncomfortable, wrong. Humans had to explain that survival sometimes required violence, that protecting others meant being willing to hurt those who threatened them. Linda Walsh, the retired history professor, gave lectures each evening. Aliens gathered to listen as she explained human history, how humans had fought for survival on a death world where everything wanted to kill them. She told stories of ancient battles, of warriors who held mountain passes against impossible odds, of defenders who protected cities with nothing but courage and sharp metal. "Humans are not the strongest species," Linda said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We're not the fastest or the toughest, but we're the most stubborn. We survive because we refuse to die. We adapt, we cooperate, we remember, and we never ever give up." The aliens listened and began to understand. Humans were not naturally violent. They were naturally persistent. Everything else followed from that. Raymond continued mapping the forest, but now he worked with mixed teams. Chitters with their compound eyes could spot details humans missed. Deepkin could track scents through water. Lumens could see into spectrum ranges invisible to others. Together they built comprehensive maps of Riftclaw territories, den locations, and hunting patterns. They usually hunt at dawn and dusk, Raymond explained at a planning meeting. They avoid midday heat. They prefer ambush over direct assault. But they're learning. That first attack was uncoordinated, driven by opportunity. Next time they'll be smarter. How long until next time? Robert asked. Days, maybe a week. The solar flare's effects are fading. Drones will come back online soon, but there's a window where we're vulnerable. Robert nodded. Then we make that window as dangerous for them as possible. More traps went up. More defenses were built. Humans taught and aliens learned. Not everyone learned at the same pace. Some species adapted quickly to the idea of fighting. Others struggled with concepts that violated their peaceful natures. But everyone tried, because the alternative was death. Anne's forge worked overtime, producing more weapons. But now she had apprentices. A young lumen named Bright Edge had a natural talent for metalwork. Its crystalline body could withstand heat that would burn organic flesh. Together, Anne and Bright Edge produced spearheads and arrowheads, axe blades and knife edges. David trained 3 chitters in woodworking. Their multiple limbs made them incredibly efficient once they understood the techniques. They could process lumber faster than any human, turning raw trees into shields and spear shafts, arrow shafts and construction materials. Patricia's leatherworking operation expanded to include a dozen deepkin. Their nimble fingers were perfect for the detail work of stitching and lacing. They produced armor modified for different body types, protection that each species could wear comfortably while maintaining mobility. The valley transformed. What had been separate settlements with clear boundaries became a unified defensive network. Walls connected structures. Cleared sight lines gave defenders open firing zones. Watchfires burned constantly, making sure nothing could approach unseen. Mixed patrols walked the perimeter, humans and aliens working together. On the 6th day after the first attack, a Riftclaw tested the defenses. It approached from the forest at dusk, moving cautiously, intelligent eyes assessing the changes. It found trenches where open ground had been, It encountered palisade walls instead of soft prefabricated structures. When it stepped on ground that looked solid, it fell through into a pit trap, impaling itself on stakes below. The creature's death screams echoed across the valley. Other rift claws in the forest heard. They learned that approaching the settlements now meant death. The prey had changed. The prey had teeth. That night, Robert stood on a watchtower with Click and Whistle beside him. The young chitter wore leather armor and carried a spear that no longer looked awkward in its grip. It had learned fast, driven by memories of watching its nestmates die. "Do you think they'll attack again?" Click and Whistle asked. "Yes," Robert said. "They're predators. It's what they do." "Will we be ready?" Robert looked across the valley at the defenses they had built, at the mixed patrols walking their routes, at aliens training with weapons their species had never needed before. He thought about human history, about every time his species had faced extinction and survived through determination and cooperation. "We'll be ready," he said. "Because we don't have a choice. Ready or dead, those are the options. And we choose ready." Click and Whistle's antennae waved in a pattern that meant agreement. It gripped its spear tighter and watched the forest. Somewhere in those shadows, rift claws were gathering. Somewhere out there, predators were planning their next move. But prey was planning too. And this prey had learned from 50,000 years of survival. This prey knew how to turn weakness into strength, how to make weapons from wood and stone, how to build defenses that would stand against anything nature could throw at them. The Union would eventually restore the drones. Help would come. But until then, Haven 7 would protect itself the old way. The human way, with sharp edges and strong walls and the absolute refusal to become easy meat for hungry predators. Darkness came thick and absolute. Both suns below the horizon, 3 moons hidden behind clouds. The kind of darkness that pressed against eyes like a physical weight. In the watchtowers, sentries strained to see, relying more on hearing than sight. The valley held its breath, waiting. Raymond had warned them 3 hours earlier. His scouts had found massive numbers of tracks at the forest edge, all fresh, all leading toward the settlements. Every Riftclaw pack within 10 miles was gathering. This would not be an opportunistic attack by scattered predators. This would be a coordinated assault by creatures that had learned from their first failure. Robert walked the defensive lines one last time, checking preparations. Fire arrows stood ready at each watchpost, bundles of oil-soaked cloth wrapped around arrowheads. The fires themselves were banked low, providing just enough light to see by without ruining night vision. Every defender knew their position, their role, their fallback points. At the main gate of the Chitter settlement, Anne commanded 30 fighters, humans, and aliens mixed together. They had trained for 2 weeks, learning to move as one unit. Shield wall in front, spears bristling like a porcupine's quills. Behind them, archers with bows and crossbows. Behind them, reserves ready to plug any gaps. Patricia held the deepkin defensive position with 20 defenders. The amphibious aliens had learned fast, adapting their natural swimming coordination to ground combat. They wore light leather armor that did not restrict their movement, but provided crucial protection. Spears suited their anatomy well, using their powerful leg muscles to drive thrusts home. David coordinated the lumen defenses. The crystalline beings had been the hardest to train, their bodies not designed for physical combat. But they had other advantages. When concentrated, they could focus light into beams hot enough to burn. In darkness, they became living lanterns, impossible to surprise, able to illuminate any threat that approached. The attack began without warning. No roars, no theatrical displays, just sudden movement at the forest edge. Shadows flowing like dark water across open ground. The Riftclaws had learned subtlety. They approached in silence, using the darkness, trying to get close before defenders could react. But humans had learned from ancient earth predators too. Bells hung on tripwires at the forest edge. The first Riftclaw hit a line and bells jangled, harsh and loud in the quiet night. Every watchpost went on alert instantly. Light. Robert's voice carried across the valley. Fire arrows launched from a dozen positions, arcing through darkness, trailing flame. They hit prepared kindling piles at strategic points. Fire bloomed, pushing back the night, revealing what rushed toward them. Over 200 rift claws charged across the valley floor, more than anyone had expected, more than the scouts had counted. Every pack, every hunting group, every mature predator within range. They had come together for this, united by hunger and anger and the memory of prey that fought back. The creatures hit the first trap line at full speed. Pit traps opened under their feet, spilling rift claws onto sharpened stakes. Screams filled the air, but the predators behind leaped over the pits, learning instantly, adapting. More traps caught more victims, but there were too many, moving too fast, coming from too many directions. Anne's position faced the first wave. 20 rift claws charged her shield wall, confident in their mass and momentum. "Brace!" Anne shouted. Shields locked together, spears angled forward, humans and chitters side by side. Impact. The sound of collision echoed like thunder. Shields cracked. Spears shattered, but the wall held, barely. Claws scraped against wood and metal. Teeth snapped at faces. The front line pushed back with everything they had, boots digging into earth, muscles screaming with effort. Second rank, thrust. Spears from the second line shot forward through gaps, finding flesh. Rift claws howled. The creatures tried to circle, looking for flanks, but the formation rotated, always presenting shields, always pointing spears at throats and bellies. Archers fired over the shield wall, arrows striking at point-blank range. Crossbow bolts punched through scales. Rift claws fell, but more came. The predators learned to attack the same spots repeatedly, trying to break through by concentration of force. Anne called rotation commands, fresh fighters replacing tired ones, maintaining constant pressure. At Patricia's position, rift claws came from the lakeside, emerging from water like nightmares. But the Deepkin knew water better than any land predator. They had built underwater barriers, concealed beneath the surface. Rift claws hit submerged spikes and barbed nets. The water turned dark with blood. Those that made it to shore found defenders ready. Patricia's shield wall held the waterline, refusing to yield. Deepkin fighters thrust spears with powerful leg muscles driving points deep. They fought with desperation born from remembering their people pulled down and drowned. This was their home. They would not lose it again. David's lumens faced attacks from 3 directions simultaneously. The rift claws had identified crystalline beings as dangerous and prioritized them. 40 predators rushed the lumen position, trying to overwhelm defenses with pure numbers. The lumens activated their light-focusing ability. Beams of concentrated energy lanced out, burning through rift claw scales, cauterizing flesh. The creatures roared in pain and fury, but focusing light took time, left the lumens vulnerable. Rift claws learned to attack from multiple angles, forcing the lumens to divide their attention. Human defenders filled the gaps. David's team moved with practiced efficiency, shields protecting lumens while they built power for their next blast. Spears thrust from behind crystalline bodies, catching rift claws that tried to flank. The defense became a dance, each species using their strengths to cover others' weaknesses. A massive rift claw, larger than any seen before, broke through a section of palisade wall at the Chitter settlement. The wood splintered like kindling under its charge. It stood in the breach, roaring challenge, a monster from nightmare. Behind it, more predators poured through. Click and Whistle saw the breach open, saw defenders falling back, saw the settlement about to be overrun. The young Chitter made a decision. It grabbed a spear in each of its 4 manipulator limbs and charged the massive rift claw alone. For the nest, Click and Whistle screamed in its own language, a sound like breaking glass. 4 spears struck simultaneously. The giant rift claw recoiled, more surprised than hurt. It swatted at Click and Whistle, claws raking across the Chitter's shell, cracking it, sending the small alien flying. But the attack bought seconds. Seconds for other defenders to reach the breach. Seconds for Anne to arrive with reinforcements. Anne hit the giant rift claw with a shield bash that would have killed a human. The creature staggered. Behind her, 10 humans poured through, forming a living wall in the breach. Spears thrust in unison, targeting joints and soft tissue. The giant rift claw fought like a demon, killing 2 humans before multiple spear points found its heart. The creature fell, blocking the breach with its own massive body. Other rift claws trying to follow had to climb over their dead pack leader, exposing themselves to concentrated spear thrusts. The breach became a killing zone. Across the valley, similar battles played out. Defenders held walls and trenches. Archers fired until their fingers bled. Shield walls advanced and retreated, adapting to pressure, refusing to break. The training paid off. The defenses worked, but the cost was terrible. A lumen named Clearsong shattered while protecting 3 young chitters. Its crystalline body exploded under a rift claw's claws, shards flying like shrapnel. The light that had been its life force faded to darkness. A Deepkin warrior named Swift Current died holding a choke point. 5 dead rift claws piled at its feet. It sang its death song in burbling notes as it bled out, refusing to retreat, buying time for others to escape. A human named Sarah fell when a rift claw broke through the line. She managed to thrust her spear through the creature's eye before claws opened her throat. She died knowing she had protected the family of chitters sheltering behind her position. The battle raged for 4 hours. 4 hours of constant fighting, rotating defenders, holding lines that bent but never broke. Slowly, inevitably, the Riftclaw assault weakened. The predators were brave and strong, but they fought as individuals. Defenders fought as an organized force, supporting each other, covering weaknesses, maximizing strengths. When the first sun touched the horizon, the remaining Riftclaws retreated. They left half their number dead or dying on the valley floor. They had learned a lesson more painful than the first. These prey were not prey anymore. These creatures fought with coordination and tools that turned soft bodies into hard targets. Robert stood in the center of the valley as dawnlight revealed the cost of victory. 37 defenders dead, over 100 wounded, every settlement damaged, but standing, surviving, refusing to become easy meals for hungry predators. He found Click and Whistle being treated by a medic. The young chitter's shell was cracked in multiple places, but it would live. It looked up at Robert with eyes that had seen too much death. "Did we win?" it asked weakly. Robert knelt beside the young alien. "We survived. Sometimes that's the same thing. I was so scared. Fear is good. Fear keeps you alive. Courage isn't being unafraid. Courage is being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway." Click and Whistle's antennae drooped. So many died. So many lived because of what we built together. Because we prepared. Because we refused to be victims. Anne approached limping, her armor dented and scored with claw marks. "Perimeter is secure. Last Riftclaw sighting was 10 minutes ago, heading deep into forest. Casualties? Could have been worse. Would have been worse without the defenses." Robert stood, looking at the mixed groups of defenders helping each other. Humans treating wounded lumens. Chitters sharing water with exhausted deepkin. Species that had been strangers 3 months ago now bonded by shared battle. Shared loss, shared survival. A sound rose from the valley. Not words, not any single language, but a sound of defiance and survival. Of creatures who had faced death and refused to yield. Different voices, different species, one declaration. They had survived the night. They had held the line. And the forest knew now, finally knew, that Haven 7 was defended by more than machines. It was defended by beings who remembered how to fight, how to build, how to survive using nothing but wood and metal, and the absolute determination to live. The Union transport ships descended through clean morning air, their hulls gleaming like polished silver. They had taken 6 days to arrive, delayed by the same solar storm that had knocked out the drones. 6 days that felt like 6 years to those who had lived through them. 6 days of constant vigilance, of rebuilding defenses, of mourning the dead and caring for the wounded. Ambassador 12 voices speaking as one emerged from the lead transport. It was a collector, a species that lived as a hive mind spread across multiple bodies. Each body spoke simultaneously, creating harmonies that made basic communication sound like music. It had come to assess the disaster and determine what aid Haven 7 needed. What it found was not what it expected. The valley had changed. Wooden walls connected settlements that had been separate before. Watchtowers stood at strategic points. Trenches ringed the entire colony. At the forest edge, warning signs marked trap lines in multiple languages. Bodies of rift claws still littered parts of the valley, being processed by work crews into leather and bone and other useful materials. The ambassador walked through the main settlement, its multiple bodies spreading out to observe from different angles. It saw aliens of different species working together, chitters and humans building new sections of wall, deepkin and lumens crafting weapons in workshops that smelled of wood smoke and hot metal. Everywhere it looked, it saw cooperation that should have been impossible, and it saw weapons. Thousands of weapons. Spears and bows, axes and crossbows, shields and armor, all crafted by hand from basic materials. All technically legal under the Haven 7 Charter, but clearly designed for war. Robert met the ambassador in what had become the colony's central gathering area. It had been an empty space between settlements 3 months ago. Now it was a fortified command center with clear sightlines in all directions. "Ambassador, Robert greeted formally. "Welcome to Haven 7. All of the ambassadors' bodies spoke together. "We came expecting to find survivors hiding in ruins waiting for rescue. Instead we find this. Explain." "We defended ourselves. With primitive weapons. With defenses that belong in museums. With tactics from species' ancient histories. With what worked," Robert corrected. "The drones failed. Modern systems went offline. We adapted." Another Union official approached, a tall being covered in feathers that rustled with disapproval. It was a soaring mind, a species known for rigid adherence to rules and regulations. "You violated the spirit of the disarmament agreement. This colony was meant to be peaceful, demilitarized, cooperative." Anne stepped forward, still wearing armor, scorched and dented from battle. "We cooperated. Different species working together. We were peaceful until predators forced us to defend ourselves. And we followed every letter of your laws. You built weapons." "We built tools," Anne corrected. "Wood and metal shaped by hand. No firearms. No energy weapons. No military technology as defined by Union standards. Just craftsmanship and knowledge. If that violates your rules, perhaps your rules need examination." The soaring mind's feathers ruffled in agitation. "This sets a dangerous precedent. Other colonies will see what happened here. They will arm themselves." "Good," Robert said flatly. "They should. Because machines fail. Technology breaks. And when that happens, people need to know how to protect themselves." Ambassador 12 voices speaking as one raised multiple hands for silence. Its bodies moved through the gathering, examining everything carefully. It stopped at a memorial being constructed near the center. Names were carved into wood in multiple languages and writing systems. Human names beside chitter designations. "Deepkin identifiers next to lumen frequencies. These are the fallen," the ambassador asked. 37 defenders, Robert confirmed. Human, chitter, deepkin, and lumen. They died protecting each other. Their species didn't matter. Their willingness to stand together did. One of the ambassador's bodies reached out and traced a human name. Sarah. She was young, 23. She had family back on Earth waiting for her to finish her colony contract. Robert's voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. She died with a spear in her hand, protecting chitter children she had known for less than a month. The ambassador was quiet for a long moment, all its body still. "Then show me everything. I want to understand what happened here." They walked through the valley for hours. Robert showed the ambassador the defenses, explained the tactics, demonstrated how weapons worked. They visited the forge where Anne and Bright Edge crafted new spearheads. They toured David's workshop where chitter apprentices learned to shape wood. They watched Patricia teaching advanced leatherworking to a class of mixed species. At the training ground, mixed units drilled with shields and spears. A Lumen commander shouted orders that a month ago would have seemed impossible. "Shield wall advance. Second rank ready spears. Rotation on my mark." The troops moved with coordination that came from shared experience and mutual trust. They had bled together. They had survived together. Now they trained together, preparing for threats that might never come but that they would face as one if they did. Linda Walsh found the ambassador near evening. The retired professor had been documenting everything, creating a comprehensive record of Haven 7's transformation. She carried a thick folder of notes and sketches. "You're wondering if this can be replicated," Linda said without preamble. "If other colonies can learn what we learned here, can they?" the ambassador asked. "If they're willing to admit that advanced technology isn't the answer to everything. If they're willing to learn old skills that most species forgot thousands of years ago. If they're willing to accept that sometimes the best tools are the ones that never need batteries or updates or replacement parts." Linda opened her folder, showing detailed diagrams of defenses and weapons. "I've documented our methods. Anyone can learn them. The materials are everywhere. Wood, stone, metal, leather. The knowledge is simple enough that children can understand it. But it requires work, practice, and humility." "Humility?" "Admitting that your ancestors knew things worth remembering. That progress isn't always measured in technological advancement. That sometimes survival means going backward to move forward." The ambassador took the folder carefully. "The Union Council will debate this for months." "Let them debate," Linda said. "Meanwhile, people will learn. They'll teach each other. Knowledge spreads faster than official decisions." That night, the ambassador attended a gathering where the entire colony came together. Species mingled freely now. The clear boundaries that had existed 3 months ago completely erased. Humans shared food with chitters. Deepkin sang harmonies with lumens. Young of different species played together, inventing games that mixed their various abilities. Click and Whistle approached the ambassador, shell still healing but spirit strong. Before humans came, I knew only my own kind. I thought other species were too different to understand. Now I train with them. I fight beside them. I would die for them. How did this happen? The ambassador asked. Humans taught us that survival requires cooperation, that different abilities become greater strength when combined, that walls between species are only as strong as we make them. Click and Whistle gestured with a manipulator limb at the gathering. This is what happens when species stop seeing differences as barriers and start seeing them as advantages. Robert stood to address the colony as darkness settled over the valley. Fires burned in braziers, pushing back the night. Every species was represented in the crowd. Every settlement had sent people to stand together. 3 months ago, we were strangers, Robert began. Different species, different cultures, different ways of thinking. The Union brought us together and said, be peaceful. But peace without strength is just waiting to become a victim. Real peace comes from being strong enough to defend what matters, and wise enough to know when not to use that strength. He paused, looking at faces both human and alien. We survived because we remembered old lessons, because we combined knowledge from different species, because we refused to accept that helplessness was the same as peace. What we built here isn't perfect. We lost people we loved. We carry scars that will never fully heal. But we survived together. We protected each other. We proved that different. Species can be stronger united than they ever were separate. Anne stepped forward carrying a spear. This weapon saved lives. It's made from wood and metal, shaped by hands that learned from hands that learned from hands going back thousands of years. No computer designed it. No factory produced it. Just knowledge passed down through generations of people who refused to forget how to survive. She planted the spear in the ground. We're donating this and 50 others to a new museum we're building. Not to celebrate war, but to remember what saved us. Future colonists will see these weapons and understand that technology is wonderful until it fails. That knowledge is the most important tool any species can carry. David spoke next, his voice carrying clearly. We're establishing a school. Human instructors will teach anyone who wants to learn these old crafts. Metalworking, woodworking, leatherworking, defense tactics, trap construction, everything that kept us alive. This knowledge belongs to everyone now. Patricia added, and we'll learn from other species too. The chitters have construction techniques we never imagined. The deep can understand water in ways that will change how we think about irrigation and defense. The lumens have shown us how to use light itself as a tool and weapon. We share knowledge, all of us, because that's how cultures grow stronger. The ambassador watched and listened and finally understood. Haven 7 had not just survived a crisis. It had transformed into something new. A place where species met not as separate groups tolerating each other, but as a genuine community building something together. The next morning, as the Union ships prepared to depart, the ambassador approached Robert one last time. The council will not like my report. What will you tell them? The truth. That peace enforced by weakness is no peace at all. That you saved yourselves not by violating our rules but by remembering knowledge we thought obsolete. That Haven 7 has become what we hoped it would be, just not in the way we expected. The ambassadors' bodies moved in a pattern that indicated respect. You humans. You are not the strongest species, not the fastest or smartest. But you remember, you adapt, you survive, and somehow you teach others to do the same. Robert smiled. We've had a lot of practice. Earth was not kind to us. We learned to be unkillable because the alternative was extinction. Now we share those lessons because no species should have to learn them the hard way. The ships lifted off, carrying the ambassador back to Union headquarters where debates would rage for months about Haven 7 and its implications. But in the valley, life continued. Species worked together, building and learning and growing. Children practiced with wooden swords, learning skills their parents had forgotten. Adults crafted weapons they hoped never to use but were grateful to possess. The forest still held dangers. Rift claws still hunted in the deep woods. But they no longer approached the valley. They had learned that the soft prey with the strange tools were the most dangerous creatures on Haven 7, not because of claws or teeth or size, but because of minds that planned and hands that crafted and hearts that refused to surrender. Robert stood on a watchtower at sunset looking across his home, not a human settlement anymore, not separate species living in proximity, but a true colony, mixed and unified, stronger for its diversity. Smoke rose from forges. Sounds of construction echoed from workshops. Guard patrols walked perimeters, humans and aliens side by side. Anne joined him, wiping soot from her hands. Think the Union will shut us down? They might try, but knowledge spreads. Other colonies will hear what we did. They'll start preparing. You can't unteach what people have learned. So we started something. We remembered something, Robert corrected. Something that should never have been forgotten. That tools don't make people helpless. That old knowledge has value. That different species working together are stronger than any species alone. Below them, Click and Whistle led a training session for young colonists. Mixed species, learning together, protecting each other. The future of Haven 7 taking shape one lesson at a time. No weapons allowed, they said, Anne murmured, looking at the valley full of spears and bows, shields and armor. And we obeyed, Robert replied. These aren't weapons, they're promises. Promises that will protect each other, that will remember how to survive, that will never be helpless again. Those are promises worth keeping, worth teaching, worth passing down to every generation that comes after. The suns set behind the mountains. Darkness came to Haven 7, but the darkness held no terror now. Fires burned on walls where guards kept watch. Forges glowed where craftspeople worked. And in workshops and training grounds and homes throughout the valley, knowledge lived and grew, passed from hand to hand, species to species, ensuring that whatever challenges came next, Haven 7 would face them together, armed not with prohibited technology, but with something far more dangerous and far more enduring, the absolute refusal to become prey.